This morning, I would like to share with you a sermon titled, Is It a Coincidence? I don't know if you ever heard of this book called The Little Prince, but a French author named Antoine de Saint-Exupéry wrote a book called The Little Prince, and it is one of my favorite books that I read frequently. And the book has given me lots of help and lots of inspiration through the years. And Antoine, he wrote the book to give hope and dreams to the French people suffering and facing trials under Nazi occupation. And one of the most famous lines in the book is as follows: Here is my secret. It's quite simple. One sees clearly only with the heart. Anything essential is invisible to the eyes. What Antoine said is quite right. The essential things in life are the profound, deep truths. It's like a secret that's hidden, and it's something that we can't see with our naked eyes. It deals with what the truth is. So no worldly knowledge or wisdom, no reason can reveal them. In other words, the truth that the Bible tells us can only be seen through the eyes of faith. Our passage today reveals the hidden truth that can only be seen through the eyes of faith. And I pray that God will help us see through the eyes of faith and help all of us this morning. If you'd like to repeat after me, it was not a coincidence. It was not a coincidence. One of the things that our passage today makes clear is that it was not a coincidence. We read that the people of Israel crossed the Jordan River safely. And the Bible says the Jordan River returned to its place as soon as they all crossed the river. And the river was as flooded as before. Let's look at Joshua chapter 4, verse 18 once again. Let's read that together. And the priests came up out of the river, carrying the ark of the covenant of the Lord. No sooner had they set their feet on the dry ground than the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and ran at flood stage as before. Well, what is the Bible trying to emphasize in this verse? What is it trying to tell us? The Bible is telling us that it was not a coincidence that the water of the Jordan River returned to their place. Non-believers deny many things that God has done. Some scholars say that the Jordan River stopped flowing because the soil around the river had collapsed and stopped the flow. Now, some people deny that the Israelites crossed the Red Sea at all. They say Israelites crossed a shallow lake referred to as the Reed Sea. What they're trying to do is they're trying to deny the miracle of God. And some deny the resurrection of Jesus Christ, saying that it was one of Jesus' disciples that stole his body from the tomb and lied to everyone that Jesus had come back to life. So it is important to note that there is nothing to believe in the Bible if we don't have faith. For example, the story of creation of heaven and earth, the parting of the Red Sea, the parting of the Jordan River, the healing of lepers, and flour and oil that never runs out, Jesus walking on water, the miracle of 5 loaves and 2 fish, bringing people back to life, and the resurrection, the ascension, and everything becomes a fictional story without the eyes of faith. Without the eyes of faith, every event in the Bible becomes suspect and suspicious. Many stories seem absurd, and whoever believes in them must be foolish. So without the eyes of faith, events in the Bible seem coincidental. It seems coincidental that Ruth gathered the grain in the field of her kin Boaz. And the cows that have never pulled a cart carry the ark towards the Beth Shemesh. And also a story about a random person drawing his bow and accidentally striking and killing Ahab, the king of Israel, in the war. All these stories may seem like coincidence. Yes, if we look at the scripture without faith, we will say it's all coincidental. Let's take a closer look at the scripture on what it is telling us. Ruth chapter 2, verse 3. Let's read it together. So she went out, entered a field, and began to glean behind the harvesters. As it turned out, she was working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. The Bible says, as it turned out. But was it a coincidence? Let's look at the next verse. From 1 Samuel chapter 6, verse 9. Let's read that together. But keep watching it, meaning the cows. If it goes up to its own territory toward Beth Shemesh, then the Lord has brought this great disaster on us. But if it does not, then we will know that it was not his hand that struck us, but that it happened to us by chance. Was it by chance? Was it by coincidence? In the next passage, 1 King chapter 22, verse 34. Let's read that together. But someone drew his bow at random and hit the king of Israel between the sections of his armor. The king told his chariot driver, "Wheel around and get me out of the fighting. I've been wounded." Were these incidents a coincidence? No, they were not. The Bible emphasizes that all this may seem to the human eye by chance, by coincidence, but it wasn't by chance or an accident. It was actually God choosing Ruth to carry out God's plan of salvation through Boaz and Ruth. So God led Ruth to the field of her kin Boaz to rescue Ruth and Naomi from their troubles. And then later Boaz and Ruth, they become married and they become the ancestor of King David and eventually Jesus. It wasn't a coincidence. And the Bible emphasizes that even the cows that went up to Beth Shemesh, it was not by chance that the cows went up there. Because the cows had recently given birth to calves, and their instinct was to stay with their calves. But the two cows that had never been yoked, that have never dragged a cart before, dragged the cart loaded with the Ark of the Covenant to Beth Shemesh by themselves. Some people may say, well, that's a coincidence. But it wasn't. And it was no accident that Ahab, the evil king of Israel, was accidentally killed by a random arrow on the battlefield. Now some may say, wow, that's really bad luck. But was it a coincidence? The Bible says it was a result from not listening to God's warning through the prophet Micah. That's right. All these stories are not coincidence. Jesus says that not a single sparrow will fall to the ground unless God allowed it. In Matthew chapter 10, verse 29. All these things may seem like a coincidence to our eyes, but it is all God's work. Amen? The same is true of the Jordan River flowing again in today's passage. It wasn't a coincidence. It was God's work. Another lesson that we can gain from today's story, if you like to repeat after me, size of our faith determines how much we can see. A pastor wrote down about his trip to Europe and visiting Interlaken in Switzerland in his travelogue. Anybody visited Interlaken in Switzerland? Okay, I've only seen pictures, and it's beautiful. When I think about the Swiss Alps, I think about Sound of Music. Anybody here watch Sound of Music? Great movie, right? Anyways, so this pastor traveled to Switzerland, Interlaken, and this is his travelogue. This is what he wrote. And this is a picture of what the area looks like. He wrote, "I spent 3 days looking at a mountain in Interlaken, Switzerland. and I didn't know the mountain's name. I thought it was just a part of the Alps. And I was sad to think that I didn't get to see the Jungfrau Mountain when I left Interlaken. I didn't know until I got home that the mountain I had been looking at was the Jungfrau Mountain. I had no idea what I was looking at, so I completely missed it. I wish I had known that the mountain was Jungfrau when I was there. What this pastor would later say is that we can only see to the extent that we know. And he said studying the Bible is the same way. It makes sense. If we plan on going to a Holy Land tour, we have to study in advance the significance of the places we visit, because we will only know to the extent of what we know. This same principle can be applied to our spiritual life as well. The truth is that we only see to the extent of our faith when it comes to our spiritual life. There are so many wonders and mysteries in the world. There are these small, slender, gray and white birds known as Arctic terns. They are known for their long yearly migration. It travels from its Arctic breeding grounds to Antarctica to enjoy the Antarctic summer. So that means they travel about 25,000 miles each year. And what is really impressive about these birds is that they can navigate very precisely. They're not using the position of the sun or stars. And the scientists actually tested this theory by covering their eyes, but they're still able to navigate correctly. But it's not just the Arctic terns. There are many animals, including salmons. They're also known for their long travels. They make their tour all around the Pacific Ocean, and when it's time to breed, they come back to their birthplace. It's a genuinely fantastic mystery of life. They were not taught. And they don't carry a little compass around. And no one taught them their exceptional travel skills. They are born with it. They already possess more sophisticated sensors in their brain than the state-of-the-art computers today. Not only that, it's not a skill that they gain throughout their lifespan. The navigation information they have is already present in their DNA without someone giving them the information. Living organisms contain far superior and precise biomachines that are well beyond the wisdom and capabilities of man-made machinery. How is that possible? The answer is simple. It is possible because God, the Creator, has supernatural knowledge. And God designed and created life. God gave magnificent capability for navigation to Arctic terns and many wildlife creatures. These are the things that can only be seen with the eyes of faith. And that's why faith is the eyes of the Spirit. In Hebrews chapter 11, verse 3, it says, let's read that together. It says, by faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. Without faith, nature is just an evolutionary outcome and a series of random accidents or coincidences. Without faith, we can't see the hands of God that created the universe. Dear friends, the truth in the Bible is revealed to us when our eyes of our faith is open. Amen? We need to ask God to help us see with our faith, and that we will be able to grasp and understand the wonderful mysteries that God has put before us. So I pray and hope that God will open our eyes to see the truth and beauty of God working around us and in us. Amen? The third lesson for this morning, if you could repeat after me. Look for God's providence disguised as chance. look for God's providence disguised as chance. We need our eyes of faith to see God's providence. And they're often disguised as chance to God's people. One of my favorite English words is serendipity. It's fun to say it, and it has a wonderful, wonderful meaning. This word originated from a 1754 novel by an author named Horace Walpole. And in his book, it tells a story of three princes of a place called Serendip. And they were constantly making accidental discoveries that had nothing to do with their quest. And we use the word today to mean the occurrence or development of events by chance in a happy or beneficial way. In other words, it's random good luck. The word serendipity, I believe it also describes how God works in our lives as well. Dr. Schweitzer was a famous philosopher, a theologian, and a musician. And by the age of 30, he was already a well-accomplished musician, philosopher, and a scholar. But he was troubled by a gap between his faith and his way of life. Then one day, his neighbor's mail was delivered to Schweitzer by mistake. It was a magazine that addressed current issues in Africa. Schweitzer read about the misery and suffering of native Africans on his way to his neighbor's house. And in that moment, he heard God's voice speaking through the magazine. So he immediately abandoned all his pursuits and the bright future that he had, and he focused on studying medicine to help the natives in Africa. And after graduating, he left for Africa, and he served and helped those living in Africa with the love of Jesus Christ and lived the rest of his life there, and he was buried there. Some people discover God's grace, God's providence, God's plan, God's guidance, and God's presence in situations that seem like a coincidence or accident. My journey as a pastor began in 2006 with a simple invitation to have lunch. By chance, at that lunch, I met the youth pastor of St. Luke there, and I agreed to help him with the youth ministry as a volunteer. That luncheon changed my life. Dear friends, as people of God and as people of faith, we must be able to discover God's providence and grace in our lives. God allows certain things to happen in our lives, whether good or bad, but God allows these things to happen, because He is leading us and He is guiding us. And we can see that more clearly in our next lesson, which is, if you could read that for me, develop a habit of seeing by faith. There's an Indian proverb that says, sometimes the wrong train takes you to the right station. It's a real proverb. And I think this statement is true for all those who have experienced God's providence, God's guidance, and God leading us. The story of Joseph, his life story sounds like he's been on a wrong train for a long time. Joseph's brothers sold him to traders at the age of 17. Joseph, a young man, lived every day without giving up his life in difficult situations as an enslaved person. His owner, Potiphar, recognized Joseph for being intelligent and hardworking. Soon, Potiphar made him responsible for all of his household affairs. But Joseph's peace did not last very long. When Joseph rejected Potiphar's wife's seduction she accused Joseph, saying he tried to take advantage of her. So Potiphar threw Joseph in a royal prison. And once again, Joseph's life was taken off course, and now he was spending his days in prison. However, Joseph did not give up and lived each day doing his best, even in this dire situation. While he was still in prison, Joseph once again proved to be intelligent and dependable to those around him, and he became a trusted person even in prison. Then, by chance, Joseph interpreted the dreams of the king's cupbearers and baker. Joseph was able to correctly interpret their dreams, and the king's baker was executed while the cupbearer was restored to the Pharaoh's court. But unfortunately, the cupbearer forgot about Joseph, and Joseph continued to remain in prison. But God did not forget Joseph. When the time came, Joseph was given a chance to interpret the Pharaoh's dream. And Joseph was able to interpret the Pharaoh's dream with God's wisdom. And Joseph became the prime minister of Egypt, having earned his trust. Joseph, the prisoner, was now the second most powerful figure in Egypt. Eventually, a severe famine came to the region as Joseph predicted, and the brothers who had sold Joseph were now lying down in front of Joseph to buy food in Egypt. To sum up the long story, Joseph reveals to his brothers that he is Joseph. And upon hearing this, his brothers trembled with fear. In Genesis chapter 45, verse 4 through 5, this is what it says. Let's read it together. He says, Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me." When they had done so, he said, "I'm your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you." Joseph acknowledged that all of his trials, all of his ups and downs, it was because of God's providence. Joseph said that everything that has happened in his life happened in order for God to save them. And Joseph's story teaches us how we can live without losing faith in the midst of a deep despair and suffering. Throughout Joseph's life, he tried to discover God's providence in every situation. You see, Joseph had a good habit of seeing through the eyes of faith. Joseph trusted God. Joseph trusted God that God will always lead him and guide him. So, dear friends, let us do our best to see God's fingerprints in all areas of our life. Amen? Because nothing is coincidence or accident with God. Do you believe that? Michelangelo, the Renaissance artist, he was notoriously picky about the marbles that he used for his sculptures. Yet, for his masterpiece, David, he used a block the other artists had deemed unworkable. The block had been sitting outside for 40 years, and it had deteriorated and grown rough after so many years out in the element. And he had many chisel marks of previous artists who tried to use a stone to create a work of art. And it seemed like the block would never amount to anything on the surface. But however, in the masterful hands of Michelangelo, it became one of the most famous statues ever created after a long period of being chiseled, carved, and polished. A person with eyes of faith sees beyond the circumstances and look to the future. That means we should not only focus on the difficult situation in front of us, but we need to have faith that God will help us. Amen? And when the help finally arrives, we can give glory to God. saying it was part of God's plan for our lives. When you hear the testimonies of God's people, you see this element of trusting in God's providence, trusting that God is faithful. So, dear friends, I sincerely hope that our eyes of faith will be open and we develop a good habit of seeing with our eyes of faith. Last lesson for this morning, if you could repeat after me. Trust in God. Trust in God. This was the reason why God wanted the people of Israel to cross the Jordan River during the flood season. Let's read Joshua chapter 4, verse 18 once again. It says, "And the priests came up out of the river, carrying the ark of the covenant of the Lord. No sooner had set their feet on the dry ground than the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and ran at flood stage as before." Why mention this? It's because God wanted his people to remember that he is mighty enough to achieve whatever he plans in any situation. If you look at wristwatches, there are many, many tiny gears and many moving parts. But one of the things that's interesting about gears, how they work, is that they rotate in opposite directions. However, all the moving parts in the watch work together to achieve the watchmaker's design. Similarly, many incidents, situations, and circumstances can move us in the opposite direction of God's plan. They are good and bad, pleasant and unpleasant, beneficial and harmful people, and there are situations and outcomes that are both good and bad. But ultimately, God brings them all together according to God's purpose. Amen? Let's look at this promise given to us in Romans chapter 8, verse 28. Let's read it together. "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." I love this verse. It says, some things? No. It says all things. That in all things, God works for the good. Another way to translate this, instead of word good, this is a sense of God works for the best. Whatever is best according to God, God works for the best of those who love him. Now, this is a promise given with a condition. This is not a promise given to every single person in the world. But there is condition for those who love God. Loving God means trusting in God, having faith in God. As for those who love God, in all things, good and bad, every situation, every circumstances, God works for the good. Amen? And God will work this out according to God's perfect plan and purpose for our lives. And what this passage gives us is strength. Strength to not to waver in any situation. And we should not be afraid. Even when we are facing the biggest obstacles, most difficult and dire situations, we should not be afraid. Not because we are strong or courageous, but because we believe in God. We trust in God. We trust that God will make all things good. So we must take one step at a time, step by step, like the people of Israel who believed and trusted God as they crossed the Jordan River. I will now conclude my message. Dear friends, the truth contained in the Bible is revealed through our faith. And when we see with our spiritual eyes of faith, then we can realize, we can see God's grace, God's providence, and his guidance, and who oversees all situations and circumstances in our life. So I sincerely pray and hope that all of us in Newgate will take a bold step in faith through any storms we face as we fix our eyes on Jesus Christ. Amen.